Tiffany and I met in college, and I think it was an Old Testament history class,
Yep.
and I was sitting behind her, and she caught my eye. I was like, that's somebody that I need to get to know. And I walked up to her after class one day, and I was like, hey, you look really pretty today.
I was literally like, you're going to have to work a little harder than that, Peter.
You are absolutely right. It's very true. But you know what? It was incredible because in that early time period when we were getting to know one another, we really actually became best friends during that time, I think. Like, at least I thought we were. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely a friendship was like the foundation of our relationship in the beginning for a long time, and probably helps now because we work together.
Yeah, that's very true. It wasn't long after that, though, that we got married and had some kids, and just life sort of began.
Yeah, we have 3 kids, Noah, Grace, and Leah, and they're so much joy.
And so much noise.
Lots of noise.
Absolutely. The house is busy and crazy and hectic, but
We love it.
we honestly can't imagine it any other way.
Yeah, I can remember a long time ago, when Noah and Grace were like 4 and 3 years old.
Yeah.
You just walked in so excited
Yeah.
to tell me you thought you knew what we were going to do for our life.
Yeah, one of my mentors, one of my good friends, we met for coffee that day, and he said, I've got an opportunity for you. And I kind of leaned in like, what could this be? And he goes, I'd love for you. I'm planting a church, and I'd love for you to apprentice with me. So you need to raise support, and you need to leave your job, and you're gonna just kind of follow along, and we're gonna do this thing together. And I was like, why not? Sign me up. And it was in those days, though, that we saw God working and preparing us. Because I was a youth pastor at the time, and we served in churches together. And we served in youth ministry for about 11 years together.
Yeah, I mean, we were back in college and
Yeah.
probably just started dating. We were driving back to Peter's hometown every
Yeah.
Wednesday because Peter was the middle school youth pastor, and I was a leader in the youth group, and it was just such a fun time. I mean, ministry has just always been a part of our story from the beginning.
Yeah, in fact, I grew up in a pastor's home. My dad was the lead pastor, and my mom served right there alongside of him. She not only, led in the music area, but she also was, on the front lines of serving women and prayer and all these kinds of things. And so it was modeled for me growing up to see a husband and a wife serving in church together. And so that was a lot of what happened to us when we got married. We just jumped right in and, just kept doing that from day one. And so I was a youth pastor for a while. And then after that, I became a campus pastor at a church in New Jersey and really enjoyed that time. Right about that time was when I went to seminary.
We had another kid.
We had another kid. Yeah, exactly.
Just tried to jam it all in there.
We just squeezed everything in this phase of life. And it was those moments where I feel like I saw God preparing us, preparing me in my education. But then also, right after that, when I was this campus pastor, God was also preparing us very practically in the ways that ministry works and how to run a church and all of those things. And
I think it was 2015.
That's right,
When you came to me again and said, I feel like God is calling me to move out of New Jersey. And that was kind of a hard thing to hear because that's where our family was and that's where I had grown up. But I remember giving Peter certain perimeters of where I would go, and I didn't want to go too far west, and I didn't want to go too far south.
So how far south do you think you said?
I don't know, maybe North Carolina or Georgia, but...
And I was like, what about Florida, right? Can we move to the promised land? And here we are. So, it was an exciting time, but actually, quite honestly, it was a little bit of a scary time for us.
Yeah, I mean, we felt like God was calling us to step out and to kind of step towards him in trust, and that's hard to do.
Yeah, because what that entailed was it entailed moving 1,400 miles away from her family, 1,400 miles away from my family, into a place where we knew no one, essentially. Yeah. But it was out of obedience to what God was inviting us and calling us to do.
Yeah, and we've been in ministry since we met, and there's been hard times throughout all those years, and there's been hard things we've had to walk through in the different positions and the different churches, and kind of just realizing that God was preparing us for something all along.
Yeah, we've said from the very beginning that we never wanted to be anywhere that God didn't want us. And if God didn't want us in New Jersey anymore, then that's not a place where we want to be. We want to be right in the center of God's calling and God's will and God's plan for
Exactly.
our lives. And it was becoming so evident that there was something here in Florida for us. We just didn't necessarily know what it was yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was in the early portions of 2016 that it became abundantly clear why God had put us in all of these different locations, why we served in youth ministry, why we were serving as a campus pastor, why a teaching pastor. All of these things culminated in the very beginning of 2016 when it became apparent that God brought us to Florida for one singular reason, and that was to start Hope City Church in Sarasota, Florida. You know, we envisioned a church that would be for Sarasota, in the sense that we knew that God was for Sarasota, and we wanted a church that would also be for Sarasota, that would show up and serve the community, that would care for people, and that would actually bring value to the place that we called home. We also envisioned a church that would engage the faith of every generation to instill faith in the next generation. We know that it's possible for every person to take their next step in their journey of faith, and we wanted to do that as a church, to see God do some incredible things in this place that we called home.
Yeah, I mean, we have 3 kids of our own, and we wanted so badly for them to have a place where their faith could grow and that they would see other adults around them seeking out God on a daily basis.
Yeah. You know, we wanted church to be so much more than just endured. We wanted church to be something that people enjoyed. We love seeing when kids come running into church and they're actually pulling their parents along with them, maybe even behind them. And it's just such an exciting thing for us to see. And that's what we envisioned from the very, very beginning.
Yeah, so we spent basically almost the whole year in 2016 just meeting with people and trying to figure out logistics and just praying so hard that God would provide the things that we needed to build his church here in Sarasota.
We had plans of opening the doors on January 22nd, 2017, and we weren't sure if anybody was going to show up. I mean, we figured that at least our kids would be there, you would be there. And
5 of us would definitely be there.
And it was an incredible day. In fact, on launch day, we had 387 people walk through those doors that day. And what a Sunday it was at Hope City Church.
So many of our friends and family were there supporting us. And we had a dream team of 42 people that also felt like God was calling them to help build God's church here in Sarasota.
And God showed himself to be faithful throughout this whole process. From the time that Tiffany and I first met, to in the early days of our marriage, to some of the things, even as you mentioned, some of the hard times in ministry, we continue to see God be faithful to us. And in the very beginning of Hope City Church, it became so apparent that God was doing some incredible things in our kids ministry, and Hope City Kids, and then very quickly after that, Hope City Youth, and we saw that the numbers of kids that were showing up on a Sunday was unbelievable, and we knew that God was doing something there. And so we just continued to lean in and push in on that and be for the next generation.
On that launch day, on January 22nd, 2017, we really did feel like God was giving us a small glimpse of all that he had planned for the future, for our family, for our church, for all the people that were connected to Hope City. We just felt like God had something huge planned for the future.
We love seeing the way that God is moving in the hearts and in the lives of people. We love seeing life change, and there's nothing greater than a baptism Sunday here at Hope City Church, where we celebrate what God has done in somebody's life beforehand, and then the transformation in their life even right now. But we know this. We know that God showed up on January 22nd. Even before that, God has been faithful to our church all throughout this whole time. And we believe that the best is yet to come. We know that what we've seen God do in the past is, quite honestly, it is the best indicator of what he's going to do in the future. That his faithfulness in the past, it's driving us and motivating us to trust him and depend on him, because he's going to be faithful to us in the future. He's going to be faithful to our church. He's going to be faithful to you in your future. And we can't wait to see what that is.
Yeah, and it's such an honor to be able to be part of this church, to be able to be part of God's church here in Sarasota. It's an honor for our family, and we really do feel like you are an extension of our family. We're so blessed that we get to do life with all of you. and we can't wait to see what God has planned for the future.
Yeah, in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, Paul writes this. He says that God is going to do immeasurably more than what you can ask or imagine. And we're praying that for our church. We're praying that for you, that God's going to do more than we could ever even imagine, because guess what? God already has. God has been so faithful to our church, and we know that he's going to be faithful in the days to come.